Okay, so I think we can go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone, where it's afternoon, evening, where it's evening, and maybe there are even some morning folks here. This is a very special event for us. We're trying something new. We are holding this live event as part of the Think Peace podcast episode. So many thanks to our guests and all of you who have joined us to share in this endeavor. We're really excited to have it in this format. So we're going to start out with the podcast in the traditional way. So hello and welcome to the Think Peace podcast, where peace crosses the mind, the show that explores the intersection of the human brain, psyche, and obstacles and opportunities to forging a lasting peace. I am your co-host, Colette Rausch. And as I mentioned, this episode is a special one because we're hosting it as part of a live event sponsored by the Think Peace Learning and Support Hub, the Mary Hope Foundation, and the Mary Hope Center for Reconciliation, or MHCR for short, at George Mason University's Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. And we'd like to give a special shout out to Marisa Maddox and Raphael Lucioni from MHCR, who helped us organize today's event. And it's also a special event because I'm co-hosting this episode with Cam Cassar, who is the senior producer of the Think Peace podcast. And not only is Cam an amazing senior producer, he's also an incredible human being. And Cam hosts his own podcast called Eccentric Podcast. And it's for those who can't be put in a box, changing perspectives through conversation, culture, and creativity. And Cam is also a master's student pursuing his degree in conflict analysis and resolution and Mediterranean security as part of the joint master's program with the Carter School and the University of Malta. So welcome. And today we are talking about healing divides from within, localizing peace building, and specifically healing across cultures, integrating peace building, reconciliation, and truth-telling processes with local wisdom and practices. And we are so honored today to have with us two special guests. And I'm going to turn it over to Cam, who will introduce our wonderful guests.
Hello, so I'm Cam Cassar. I am co-host the Think Peace podcast, as she mentioned. So our first guest today is Nyaki. Effu was born and raised in Tanzania, where she earned a Bachelor of Science degree, trained as a science teacher, and later on was trained as a healer using holistic methods. Effu is a co-founder of AFYA Holistic Healing Center located in the northeast of Brazil. AFYA supports many people from the local community as well as national and international individuals. And the center uses approaches to receive support in healing, uses different types of natural and holistic healing methodologies. Effu is a faculty member of Somatic Experiencing International and a professor of the Family Constellation System Therapy by Hellinger Institute. In the last 27 years, Effu has been living in Brazil, facilitating trainings and therapy for trauma healing using Somatic Experiencing and Family Constellation System Therapy, which focuses on generational trauma healing. While living in Brazil, Effu has also been traveling in different countries such as India, Egypt, South Korea, China, Bolivia, Peru, Spain, Uruguay, Tanzania, Philippines, and Hong Kong. So she's been everywhere facilitating trainings and workshops on different kinds of trauma healing. And due to the pandemic, Effu has also been giving international trainings, workshops, and individual therapy sessions online. Our second guest is Del Laverdure. Del is an enrolled citizen of the Crow Nation, a member of the Ties the Bundle clan, and a descendant of the Little Shell Band of Chippewa Indians. Del is an active participant in indigenous and intergenerational ceremonies, including Sweat Lodge, Vision Quest, smudging, giveaways, spiritual naming, public speaking, tobacco pipe, animal and plant medicine, honoring sacred sites, medicine wheels, spiritual offerings, 4 elements, and 4 directions. As an indigenous citizen, Del's experience and work are born out of this lifelong relationship with indigenous families and communities and his healing from intergenerational trauma. Over his professional career, Del has served many tribal nations in various capacities, including testifying and advocating for tribal legislation in Congress, guiding indigenous communities through federal agencies to obtain much needed resources, and navigating intergovernmental relations at all levels on a broad spectrum of indigenous issues. Del has also served as legal counsel for over 2 decades and held a U.S. presidential appointment from 2009 to 2012. He's held numerous tribal judgeships and was an assistant professor of law as well. Del earned his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering in 1995 and his Juris Doctorate in 1999. Del has also completed somatic experiencing professional training with provisional somatic experiencing practitioner approval. He's certified in somatic experiencing masterclasses in chronic pain and syndromes, transgenerational trauma, and COVID. He's also completed Principles of Collective Trauma Healing course by Thomas Hubble and a level 2 certified practitioner of Himalayan sound, vibrational healing, singing bowls from the Adma Bhuti School in Boulder, Colorado. So I'll pass it back over to Colette to get started with our questions.
Thank you, Cam. So we are in the presence of 2 incredible human beings whose life and work has involved healing, and also healing in a way that integrates many different ways and coming at it from different directions. So I'm very curious, and we'll start first with you, Efu. What led you to this journey of where you are today in the type of healing work that you do? How did you get from where you started to now?
Thank you very much, Colette. I would like to say hi to everybody, and thank you, Cams, for all that presentation. And I'd like to also say hi to Del. I've known Del. We've met in different areas of this kind of presentations too. So very nice to be with you here, Del. Thank you. So how did I get here? You know, in Tanzania, where I was born, healing was something that it's integrated in life, in the daily life thing. So, because I remember when I was little, if we had any problem like stomachache, or you ate too much, or you have your bloated stomach, anything, you will just say, "Mommy, I'm not feeling well," and she'll say, "What is happening?" And she just point out over there's a plant. And you take it and chew it right away and with water, and you feel better right away. So really I didn't grow up where we had pharmacy, but it was in the village. And so I grew up in that kind of climate, yeah? And I learned a lot from my mother, my grandmother, both sides. They will have also more of that kind of herbal medicines for us to share without having to learn it officially. You're told, and then you know it, yeah, because you know how it looks like. And also another thing was my grandfather used to tell us a lot of stories about healing, many other stories too, but I think he told us the story about healing of the clan, of our own clan. And I just love, when I look back into that, I love the way he tells the story. He tells the story in a way that he wants you to pick up only the resource part of the healing. Yeah, he didn't want us to remain with the traumatic part of the story. He told us the story about the clan, of our clan being smaller than other clans. And he said, because when they used to go to the war, and then they had, they have those spears they throw into each other, stealing each other cows and stuff like that, things like most of the tribes did. And he said that the people were kind of harmed. And then when they came home, because the tribe was coming into the clan was coming into distinction, so when they came back, they discovered that there was a little snail that used to be in the backyard of the house, and they will take that snail and put it on the wound, and the wound will heal completely right away. So those people saw those people going back again, and that they are enemies, like, what is happening? Of course, then one day they just came and stole it and killed it. But he said, but anyway, by the time they did that, the clan had already regained their strength. Yeah. So it just didn't want us to remain with the trauma part of it. I learned that later, but I remember looking at him. I didn't care about the war at all. I remember looking at my grandfather and said, wow, our tribe is very special. Our tribe was given this special healing energy. Yeah. So I grew up in having those kind of things and rituals and stories. And then from there, I really wanted to help other people. So as a teacher, like I said, I was trained as a science teacher. I taught, but I was not quite satisfied with teaching the classes in the setup, formal setup. I always wanted to go to the village and help young people and women and all that. So that led me into joining a bigger group of the missionary, because they said, well, we'll support your work, because I was using my own money. I didn't have any support from outside, but they promised to support my work. And then I joined them. And with that, it led me to New York, where we have our congregation. I'm a religious sister. We have a congregation called Merino Sisters of St. Dominic, and it's also an international community. So from there, I come to Brazil. When I arrived in Brazil, I found my home here, because in the northeast of Brazil, it just feels like I'm back in Tanzania. So many things I feel at home. So with that, I ended up founding a healing center here, because I felt like everything came together at that moment that I arrived here. And the healing center is with the women from the community who were suffering violence. And with that, just learning everything as time goes. Learning how to collect their herbal medicines and using it right at the center. That was my university, I would say. Yeah? Never really went to learn even about the plants, because the Portuguese I had to learn here, but I learned with them. Yeah. So yeah, it's just everything fall into the place in a way that I feel like my mission was meant to be this, because I didn't have to do any special effort to be where I am today. So then, in order for the work to get better, I had to learn somatic experiencing. And then, okay, something is missing. All right, I found family constellation, and that's how it went. But, sorry I take a long time, but I think that's, I needed to go back through that. This is it. And here I am, very happy with my work.
And here you are, and it was so beautiful, because all of the strands, as you talked about it, you could envision this kind of strand of learning and being and pulling that forward, and then other strands coming in and all kind of fitting the piece, and then finding your home and your mission, and it all coming together. So it truly was a journey, and I really appreciated how you described that to where you're there today, and also your PhD, or I think you referenced an actual experiential practice of processes and learning with others who have done this for generations. Thank you. So Del, same question. What has been your journey, and with the various experiences that you've had through your life that brought you here today, and the work that you are doing in your community?
First of all, thank you, Colette and Cam. Thank you for the introduction. And it's always a pleasure to see Efu again. And she's the one who was in the master class for transgenerational trauma. So it's nice to be a panelist. I feel privileged, and a lot of parallel stories. Interestingly enough, even though it's half a world away. So I was born into, two tribes, but we are a matrilineal people, so we always follow our mother's side. And from that, as was introduced in the Taisabondo clan, we have certain kind of cultural norms or behaviors that we're really born into. And one of them is your mother's side. Anyone who's related on your mother's side gets to brag you up. So you always feel like you're walking, in the clouds, and they just love you up and brag you up, and you just feel like you're super special. And then the controlling other part is on the father's side, it's called the teasing clan. So they constantly tease you to put you back in your place and have humility. So we have this kind of balance even within our system. So you'll see, like a lot of times I'll see one of my uncles and I'm like, oh, I wonder if I should kind of veer off and go in a different direction because I know it's coming at me. I know he's going to tease me about something. And then, you go through it and it all has its purpose. And I mention that as growing up because I had a lot of relatives who served in the U.S. military from kind of the Plains Indian culture. And so there was a lot of, post-war trauma that was brought back. And I always remember that because, back in those days, there wasn't as much availability of the behavioral mental health services that there are now. And so they did bring back, those issues, and we still, tried to stay within the culture as much as we could. And as I left the homeland here, which is out in southeastern Montana, north of Yellowstone Park, where, a lot of my ancestors went to, I left for Western education. And then, even though I became a faculty member, I always had this strong pull to return home. And one of my clan uncles became the elected leader of our tribal nation. And that was the impetus for me to return. And upon my return, I just went into the various ceremonies, sweat lodges, other things, and just reintegrated. And I was fortunate to have a community that still had a lot of culture and sharing and expectations, constant invitations. And even though it was a brief return, and I went to DC for federal service, I returned again because I always knew I was going to. And they say that, like the bison are our brothers, and, they always return home, very loyal, strong. They're our older brothers. So we're taught to return home when we need to help out. And to the extent that you can, or you have the training, you do. And then you always walk with kind of humbleness to re-enter the ceremonial space. And really, when you have your face on Mother Earth and you're gasping for that one breath, it reminds you of how small we are, and at the same time, how we're part of everything else. We're part of the universe, and we have our role to play, and that we need to do the internal work so that we can be, in our prayers, be a good relative. That's one of our primary purposes, is to be a good relative for others and be a resource for others to the extent that we can. And so, after I did all the different levels of service, I realized, that I could bring a bunch of resources to these indigenous communities, but what we really needed was healing at the same time as we bring the resources. Because if you don't have the internal healing, it's not going to stick, it's not going to stay. And we needed to heal from, multiple generations of terrible federal policies and colonialism. And, it's still a slow process to unwind all of that. But at the same time, if we have healing and resources, I do see hope in the next generation being able to really provide for all our relatives. So that's kind of a real, short summary of the snapshot of how I got to where I'm at, which is still in the homeland, my mother's homeland.
Yeah, and Del, it was this concept of home and coming home, and then the concept of healing, as you mentioned. One talks about bringing healing, whether it's to one's homeland or to where one feels called to, yet it's not healing others. It's so much more around healing of ourselves, of the past, the present. And so I would love to explore the question of, when you think about healing, as people say we need healing, how do you define that, and what does that look like? in the context in which you work. So Efu, let's start with you on that concept of healing, defining, and what does that mean? What does that look like? And how does one get there?
Yeah, thank you. So, you know, healing for me, the way I have understood it from practice, I never read it from anywhere else. I mean, you hear it from different ways, but for my own practice, healing, it's like being whole again. Like okay, so whenever something happened, I mean, I see it even like yesterday, I'm attending people. I have these people one after another, I'm attending, but over suddenly, I realized that I'm home today, but usually I go to my workplace where we have the organization, where AFIA, the organization that I work with women, it's in my workplace. So I go there and I'm in front of the person that I'm attending, and over suddenly I see my computer, it's like there's just this much left of a charge. I panic a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose my charge in the middle of session. And the person was so excited. Oh, Efu, she was from India. She's like, Efu, I'm so happy to see you again. How nice, really, I feel so good. And I'm like, oh, I'm losing the energy. So I say, okay, sorry, just 1 minute. I will grab my cable and content. And I realized that I left it at home. So I panicked in front of her, and I could see myself that my face was getting so rigid just because of that. And all of a sudden I said, Efu, she already said that it's so nice to see you. That's a healing on itself. Like just that contact, just that excitement to see somebody and feel good about it. That connection is healing in itself. So I hold on what she told me. She's my client, by the way. Yeah, I hold on that. Oh my gosh, thank you, Ajum. Thank you. It's nice to see you too. And I'm like, it will be okay. Whatever happened, I'll switch into that. So I forgot about it. So you can see what was happening to me was that my energy was going away. I was losing my healing energy. I was disintegrating by realizing that, oh, this is going down. But what is that? This is part of our trauma and stress. Because really, my eyes saw that the energy was very small, but it was actually enough for the whole session. Nothing went wrong for that session. But I think from the past experience, maybe something had happened like that, I panicked. And when I panicked, my energy was just disintegrating, and I'm not able to connect with her while she's so excited. So what I did with my awareness, I connected with her. And as I connected with her, I got healed from that panic moment. Like I took a deep breath and I decided I will tell her. I said, you know what, I said, Anjum, I know you realize that I was kind of paralyzed a little bit. You know, I realized that I left my connecting cable there, and I was worried that I was going to lose my power and all that. And she said, oh yeah, no problem. So we can go back. We can go into WhatsApp because you have my telephone and I have yours. That is fine. It's almost like nothing. So you know, life is like that. There's always alternatives. There's always choices. But when we operate with the stress and trauma, we always that's how we get, you know. So that's it. I mean, I'm just giving an example of healing. How does that look like? It's like when whatever happens, traumas happen to our life in the past life. In this life, you know, in the histories, that we fragment. We go into the fragmentation, and like the thinking, the body, the thinking go out that way. I was thinking only at home. Maybe who's going to go home to get this? Oh no, today our helper is not home. And so, I mean, and I'm here trying to heal. How will that happen? Yeah. So my mind is there, my body is here, my emotion is all over the place. So I was fragmented. But by recognizing that there's somebody in front of me whom I need to pay attention to, I got healed right away. It was like, oh, and the session went perfectly okay. I continued holding whatever she needed, she was bringing in. And she, by the way, I mean, she had lost her husband just in December, and we are working on that. So she's in the mourning place. But she gets excited to see me because I think she feels some healing energy that comes in there. But when I was losing it, I have to rely on her excitement. And so we were doing this dance of healing one another. And that's how the healing comes. So really, illness, you know, it's actually, I always consider like it starts with I. Illness, it's isolation, it's just individual. Wellness is we. Yeah. So if I am able to connect with others, I relax, I let go. When I just remain in my own preoccupation, in my own nervousness, and my own trauma, I've become ill. And that's what needs to be healed. I will stop there because I know Del has a lot of stuff to say too, to add into that before I take all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I love that. And it reminded me, I think we can all resonate with that. It reminded me of before you came on, and Cam and I were trying to get the Zoom, you know, all that stuff, and I could feel my face tight. And then you came on and you were just there. And it's like the shoulders went down. And it's just, it's powerful when you talk about healing. Doesn't have to be big, gigantic things, but healing can be small things that are big, that are transformative. So thank you for that. So Del, healing, what does that sound and look like to you?
Thank you for the question. And it's always fun to listen to Efu and learn from her experiences and sharing. And it's just refreshing. And there's a lot of remembering, you know, just in examples that she gives. You know, when I think of healing, I go back to presence. And I think Efu was even remarking on this. When you're fully present and in front of somebody else, or an animal, or the elements, or anything, you're not in the past, you're not stuck in the past, and you're not thinking about the future. If you're just fully present, that to me is when you feel like you're in a healing space. Because oftentimes, if we're worried about things, we're always thinking of the future. I got to plan for the future. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. And it's all the to-do lists that we have every day. Then there are some people who are stuck in the past. Oh my God, I can't believe this happened to me. And that person was this way and they were that way and they treated me poorly, and they can't let go of it. And so if you're in those two, you're not fully present where you're at. And that's where healing begins, is presence. And I do think it also starts with a pause, because, you know, we're in an attention economy. What are you going to pay attention to? Look at the volumes of information and misinformation that are being presented to all of us as humans. And you have to pick and choose, what are you going to pay attention to? And you've got computers tracking everything you do and giving you more of what you're paying attention to, right? So unless you're really aware that you're not present because all this information is there, we really have to discern what is the most important and the most supportive for us, for our own essence and other humans. So intention, what is my intention for the day? We always say, today is a good day. It just right off the bat, I woke up, thank you, Creator. I intend for this to be a great day. I'm just going to be. I'm going to set my to-do list aside for a moment, and I'm just going to thank you, Grandfather, Son, for providing that energy for me to exist. I'm going to thank all my relatives, pray for all the ones who are suffering. And I think if you approach the days like that, you really do feel a healing space. It's a felt sense. And I'll just share, and I think that morning pause, a morning, midday, and right before bed, a pause to think of all your relations. And you can stay in a healing space because you're present. But I'll share a story from my father's side. It's called the seven grandparents. And the four base ones are love, respect, humility, and gratitude. So I call in those four, and those are the base, they're the foundation. If I can be in that space, I'm going to be present and available for someone else's healing, perhaps. And then we ask for the other three grandparents, and they are courage, wisdom, and to be in my truth, my soul's truth. So when you're with those seven beings, my ancestors, I call them in, whether it's in the sweat lodge or just in a prayer. And at that moment, I'm fully present because those are reminders of the kind of human attributes that I want to embody. And so if my mind and my heart and my body are aligned, I can call in the spirit to support that. And that to me is the combination that creates healing, can be healing, if you avail yourself to it. But if you're not aware and you don't try to practice those things, then you're stuck in the past or you're in the future or you're worried about other things and you're not fully present within yourself. And I think to me, that's the steps towards healing.
Del, it's so the practices that you walk through and as you described them, even hearing them, I could feel within myself a relaxation, the words intention and presence and pause. And then the ritual you mentioned in the morning that I think of the term, what you focus on can grow. And so the saying that you have in the morning sets that intention that impacts things that come. That's just such a powerful way of forming ritual. And as you said, staying present. I was thinking how much of our lives, at least I can speak for myself, am I living in the past and the present? I would hate to think about that percentage and what that really is day to day. So thank you. So Cam, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, so you guys have both mentioned, in reading your bios, Effu, you've been all over the world, conducting healing practices. And Del, you mentioned how, you had left your tribe for some time and then came back. So I wanted to ask you guys, from your travels and, going outside of where you were born, where you call home, what are some of the things that you've learned about how, conflicts are formed and also how they can be, how they can be healed, in doing your travels? Have you gained any new perspectives on, the things that are the biggest generators of conflict and, the things that work, the things that don't work? Could you guys both elaborate on those practices?
Yes. I don't know what. Del, you want to go? I saw you nodding your head. Okay. So yes, the conflicts, every interesting and every culture and how they look at this, how they look at conflicts and how they appear to and rise. Yeah. So when I lived and I left home, left Tanzania from the village, I went right to New York, and for me, it was a lot of culture shock because it's so different. But in the house where we lived, the Merino sisters, we also had other people who were in the formation, who are learning how to become a Merino sister, because our congregation is international. So we were like 9 people in a house with 7 different cultures. So It was quite, a challenge. But I remember actually learning, especially from people in Asia, especially the Japanese and the Koreans, how they when the conflict comes up, how they resolve it. In other cultures, Western culture, we had one from Great Britain, we had American. So it's like, let's talk about it, let's talk about it. And I was in the middle of all this, I'm looking for a plant that I used to use at home, how can we use this for healing? But I mean, nobody is kind of picking it up because everybody is trying to bring their own. But one thing I think that struck me, which actually stayed with me until today, and especially what Dale said just a while ago about pose. I think the indigenous cultures and the Asian cultures are very much into that. I found the Japanese, when the conflict arises, or Japanese, Koreans, most of it, especially those big area that the people I lived with, they actually go into the silence. They don't want to talk about it right away. So now I remember trying to talk to this woman who was our formate, our leader. And I'm trying to say, say, why do you think that? And she just looked at me and she went totally silent. And so then I went also quiet. So I went to my room. And in that quiet, in my room, I realized that what happened. And so 2 days or 3 days later, we can talk about it, but we are no longer fuming. Things are clearer. So I did learn this very well, and I use this in my somatic experiencing healing processes, even in the family constellation, that when something happened, when there's a conflict, when somebody brings conflict and they want to talk about it, and I just say, why don't we just take a little time and pay attention to your body, to our bodies, I include myself in it, and we just stay with it and see what happens next. Sometimes it's hard for many people, but I just keep inviting. And when we are able to get into that resonance of silence, a very quiet place, everything settles. And then in that quiet place, there is an answer. There is some word, some wisdom that comes up. I would say, well, anyway, now I understand what happened. Or I think she didn't have any other way that she could have dealt with this. And then all of a sudden, the conflict is resolving itself from this place of silence. So I always invite people to wait. And I learned this the first time in New York with the people from the Asian cultures, So that is really beautiful. And then, of course, I reinforced that in my somatic experiencing classes. But when I went home to visit once, well, I realized too that they did it, but I guess when I left there, I hadn't integrated well in my being, because I noticed at one point when somebody came and there was a resolution that needed to happen, I remember the leader of the tribe called everybody to go into the silence. And it's like almost a prayer moment, but no prayer, just stay there. And like they say, listen to the ancestor's voice. So, I mean, I had to come that far to find something that was there that I didn't capture it at that time. So yeah, I will leave it at there. That's really one very important thing in healing I learned from other cultures.
That was beautifully put, Nefu. Just the way that you mentioned that you brought you experienced all these other cultures, and you brought that into your practice, and I know that has been extremely effective in the things that you've been able to do coming from these travels and everything. So thank you for that. Del, could you explain that a little bit? Traveling to these other places and gaining these other experiences and putting that into your practices that you do, bring those back to your tribe and your home.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Cam. And I think I guess over, my nearly half a century on this earth, I think most conflict starts within the individual, and then it becomes externalized. And if there's an imbalance, like if somebody wants something, they almost have a lean forward in their body and their parts. If you go into even internal family systems, they're leaning forward because they want something. There are those who lean back, like I'm just going to observe and see what's there. But if there's internal activation in their system, in their body, and the body does keep score, the famous book, it's just, it doesn't tell you all the times where the score is. That's the hardest part about finding out where the trauma is stored. It's stored in the body, and the body knows, and the body doesn't lie. So I always go back into the body and into my own system, find out where did this conflict come from, and then have a dialogue about what could have precipitated this. Was it the way they looked at me? Was it the way they said it? Was it what they said? Oftentimes it's not necessarily what people say, it's the way they say it, and then that oftentimes activates hurt parts of us, and even if a person doesn't intend for that to happen, that could be the effect. And so if they can slow down enough to find out what's going on inside them, because it seems like when we have unresolved trauma or wounds within our system, it almost attracts those very things to you. And until it's resolved, you'll constantly have this lesson that you've got to learn, or this resolution of whatever is hurt within you to become healed. Because you can tell, you can honestly just feel. You don't even need words. You can feel when somebody is present and they don't have these unresolved things. You can sense it, like in a room or near someone. And I think, the pandemic has revealed what has been, I think, a problem for some time, right? Which is, in our majority society, at least in the US, everything is so fast. And I mentioned the attention economy and the speed at which life occurs. Well, that leads to a lot of isolation and a lot of transactional kind of relationships. So it's easier to get hurt when it's fast and transactional in an unknown society, because they don't know you and there's a lot of assumptions, right? And that can lead to a lot of activation. Now, in the tribal society, for example, most people are known. Most families are known. You kind of know where you have a knowing about a family. You don't know it all, but you have a knowing. And, for some people that can be activating if you've been in an anonymous part of society and you go into a known where everyone's in your business, right? Wherever you go, there's somebody saying something in the gossip mill really, really kicks into high gear. And it can be hurtful, right? If it's something that's not accurate. So I think in the different ways I've seen, and I've been fortunate to travel to the Philippines and all over Europe. And what I found was, in places that are more distant or different than the country you're in, they can see things you can't see. Mm-hmm. It's just like us as individuals, we have blind spots, right? Like I've got a blind spot right here and right here. I don't know what's happening right there. And I can't see it. So it takes someone else to see what's happening right behind me. So too with communities, governments, countries. You can't see what's happening if you're right in the middle of it. So you don't know that it's moving in the direction it is. And I had a tribal elder tell me that once. I said, well, they told me this, this, and this. And they said, well, that's because they can see it. they're not in the middle of it. You know, and another piece of advice on resolving conflict is when you're resolving it within yourself and your system through these various practices, oftentimes, what was it Albert Einstein said, if you have a conflict in this realm, you've got to go to the next realm in order to resolve it. And so that's what's calling in the ancestors. Oftentimes, like if people are, say they're in grief or sorrow and they're like the wolf who has the lake trapped, we'll light a plant and ask the plant, and then the second that plant is lit, like say it's sage, boom, just changes the whole character of the area, and people will then release. Or say it's sweetgrass, I want to invite in the good. Help us resolve this conflict. Let me light this plant, and the plant medicine will help you in that way. But that, you see how the intention goes with it to resolve internal conflict that may manifest itself externally. And so I'll just kind of end with that. And
Maybe just before you say something, Cam, since he talked about a plant, can I add something there that has to do with the plant? It's interesting how we
Yes, of course. Yes.
come across like this. Yes, Del, that is very interesting because we do have a special plant that, like, so now that's my culture now. When they, when you have conflict with somebody, you know, or you create a conflict, you know, you don't just go direct to that person. You see that again, you know, you don't go direct to that person to try and talk it over, because it's, I mean, it's a trauma, so everybody is activated. So it doesn't work. You both end up just knocking out. But you look for the middle person, and we have this special leaf. It's called isale, and I brought and planted right here too. And you take it and you fold it nice, and you give it to this person, an older person that you trust, and you know that this person will be respected to the other person that you have a conflict with, and you say, please give it to so and so, and tell them I'm recognizing my part on this conflict. And then they take that leaf and they give it to that person. So when that person open their hands and look at that leaf, their energy melts. They said, okay, it's over. And then these two can come together, and the third person, and hold hands. We don't really hug, but you shake hands, or you hold here, or you hold on the shoulder, and that's it. And the reconciliation is also that.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful. What you guys mentioned. You know, Del, you mentioned the unresolved trauma, and Effu, you know, you just mentioned the reconciliation. So kind of going off of that, I wanted to ask, you know, what is the role of like truth telling and storytelling in you guys healing and reconciliation practices? It makes me think of the quote. I may say it wrong, but it's like the closest bond between two people is a single story. And I feel like in the things that you guys have mentioned, you know, you've mentioned storytelling, you mentioned truth telling, and how that's so important to reconciliation. So could you guys just expand upon that a little bit in terms of, you know, the role that truth telling has played within you guys' experiences, within your communities, and, you know, just in your practice, you know, throughout your career?
I'll let Del begin this time. Yeah.
Thank you, Effu. I know you and I could go back and forth probably quite a bit, but you know, storytelling is interesting. We had a partner we were going to do a project on in the tribal nation here that I'm from and I used to work for. And I remember we were riding in a car with them, and everywhere you've got to go, it's 100 by 70 miles, so it's a fairly large area. And we were riding in the car, and they kept talking about, oh, storytelling is dead. You know, there's social media, people aren't learning cursive anymore. They're not writing it out. Everything is an emoji or an acronym, or, you know, LOL, or, you know, whatever. And they said, storytelling is dying. It's dying. Well, we went to our tribal college and we had a kind of a community meeting. for the next 7 hours straight, people told stories. And we left that meeting and they said, oh my God, I didn't know there's a place where storytelling is still alive and well. They said, I've never heard so many stories in my life. And everyone in there had a story to tell, right? And we have this concept called killing with stories, especially for younger folks. And we also have place-based stories. So for example, let's say that we're out in the mountains. There's this place called the Prior Mountains. We call it Bapwa or Alodaja, which is where the arrowheads are, or the big stone out there. There's a creek that runs through from the mountains, and there's the story of how we began the Sweat Lodge. And this was told to me, and it keeps being told again and again. And there were two young boys that were fooling around in a teepee, and one of them got stuck in the water, and the water spirit kept pulling them back in, and they had to do an offering to release the boy. And then the boy goes inside, and I won't go into the whole story, but almost everything that we do has a story attached to it. Like, why do we do the teepee the way it does? Why is there 18 poles? Why do we have a tobacco offering, before we go into any home? Why do we use smudge to clear out the inside and the outside? And there's all these why stories, and there's a story for all of them. And interestingly enough, I just talked to my mother, who's still alive, walking the earth, and she told me every winter solstice that hit, all the kids would gather, and this was before there were homes out here. It was in lodges. And she said, and the grandparents would tell a story every night. Usually Old Man Coyote, who was a trickster, this mythical figure. And the reason they told stories about Old Man Coyote is because he would do something, and then his behavior would be out of the norm. So by telling those stories, they were teaching them how to be in the world and what not to do and what to learn from that. And so they said, be very mindful and observe what others do so that you know how to act in those situations. And so we call the winter time, which is now, the storytelling time. And at that time, we share stories of our own journeys, of our ancestors' journeys, of kind of the stories of how we came to be. And so storytelling and narratives are absolutely critical to learning our identity and remembering who we are as a people. And most tribal names translate as the people, like Ipsaloka. We're the people, we're the children of the large-beaked bird. That's our literal crow, but we say we're Ipsaloke, Ipsaloke, Aleshja, Ewishchik. I'm a child of the large-beaked bird. And there's a story that goes with it. So the only other thing I'll say is that we have stories on why this mountain is the way it is, like Wapwa. We've got the Bighorn Mountains in Nishisat, which is sacred. They call it Medicine Mountain. And then we have Chadish with the Wolf Mountains. It looks like a wolf's tooth. And so we have a story around every one of those on why it is. And we even have a canyon in our homeland, and it's called the Bighorn Canyon, because the 7 Ram brothers saved a child and they came back and they watch over this canyon. But there's a story to all of those things. And so it's interesting you asked that question, because it seems like, those are just passed down again and again and again. And they tell us why we are where we're at and why we exist as a people.
Yes. Thank you, Del. I totally agree with you. It's the same way in our tribe too. Stories are told for a reason. Stories are told for healing. Stories are told for prevention. Stories are told for so many reasons. And it's always actually going towards the healing. Yeah? The healing of the tribe, the healing of a people, and also the warning of the younger ones that are coming in order to learn more about what is what is here and what's coming. So yeah, that I won't go into that anymore because that's the same thing. I agree totally with you. Now I will add another thing here of that working as a therapist, I found people like to tell the stories, but it's not a story that teaches anything. It's not the story that you learn anything from it. It's the story of blaming somebody. So I think we're going to learn how to differentiate those kind of stories. Yeah, like Del said, stories from the tribe. Everything has a reason of existing, and that's why we are learning about. And so that our tribes do not disappear, can continue. Life continues through the stories we tell. But when I have somebody say, well, you got to listen to my story. I said, okay. As you tell your story, can you be in touch with your body also? So we can just notice what's going on. Well, and you know what happened? And he took that knife and he's going to run after me. And then I said, okay, I'm feeling very activated by the story you're telling. Can we stop just for 1 second and see what is the knife doing to our body? Because the more we keep talking about that knife, it's killing us right now. The more you repeat the story of violence, in your nervous system, the hormones are being liberated, and you go through the cycle of again trauma. So what I learned really through these methods of healing is if you stop and look for a resource, then you feel much better. And actually you start seeing something different from how the knife came, or you can let go. Because when I do that, I help people to say, well, if I feel much better, I feel so settled and so nice that I don't want to tell that story anymore. Okay, so this is the other story, yeah? So when people, well, I will add into this. So when I went to South Korea, we worked with a group of people who were really kept in an isolation. These other people, in 30 years ago, they were young people who rebelled against the government. And then, of course, the government killed half of them, or even more than half. And then, of course, those who were left there, they were kept in a place of isolation. Some of them were hurt and all that. So the trauma that those people went through. What happened is like they began to drink, drugging, and many of them were committing suicide just these years. So for the past 10 years, I've been going to South Korea, except these 2 years of pandemic situation. Every year we go and work with that group. And then we found there are other groups that are related to that to help heal the trauma. And so when we went to one of the groups, and one of the guys, he came drunk all every day, and he will say, well, you have not asked me to tell you my story of how they caught me and how they did this and how they did this. And then I stopped him. I say, wait a minute. How many times have you told that story? He said, every time people come to try and help us heal, I tell them that story. I said, well, let's look at it. How come you're still so much suffering? You know, it has not really helped much of retelling this story again and again. So then I started helping them to look at it from the body perspective. So, you know, let's look at the story. It's in the body. The traumatic story, it's in the body. It's not in the event. So we need to look at the body so that we can liberate the traumatic energy. So okay, so you see what I mean? I'm just wanting to, I always tell people, because I say, you've got to listen to my story. Everybody wants to tell their stories, but it's a story of either remaining as a victim, or a story of blaming somebody else, or story of making somebody bad. Yeah. While the stories that Del and myself are talking about, it's a story of a tribe, it's a story of learning about where you come from, It's a story that has resources. As you're telling the story, like I talk about the first story, I talk about, you feel like, wow, you get goosebumps. Wow, isn't that wonderful? And you look at your grandfather like this, you want to hear more. Yeah. So I just wanted to bring these distinctions here so that people who are listening to us can will understand that when we talk about story, this is what we mean. Thank you.
Yeah, Cam, if you don't mind, I was going to just add one thing after I
Yeah, of course.
completely agree. Obviously, all of that was very instructive and congruent. I did want to mention about the story of separation, which I think is, kind of a larger piece about the country. And an author, Charles Eisenstein, wrote a book, A More Beautiful World That My Heart Knows Is Possible. And it's about the story of separation of humanity, and separating not only from their body, but separating from community and separating from the land. They forgot that the land is what provides for all of us. And so you end up, in extractive industries or consumption, and more use instead of more balance. And I think the key to the entire kind of macro level healing is in the stories that are instructive, because then we'll realize we're not isolated, we're not islands unto ourselves, we're not an individual human being, we're actually part of a collective. And it reminds me of probably one of the most powerful stories I heard when I was younger was that I was told by an elder. He said, I just I want you to know, young man, that you'll never go in this life without a mother. And I just kind of looked at him like, whoa, what do you mean? Like, everyone's mom passes to the other side eventually. And he said, well, you have your birth mother. You have the mother, which is the lodge you live in. It protects you, whether it's your home, sweat lodge, apartment, condo, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Mother Earth. So you never go in this lifetime without a mother. And oftentimes you have multiple ones. And he said, don't ever forget that. Because if you feel lost and your birth mother's not there, you have other mothers to help you. You're never alone. And that, if you can just feel it, feel into it, it's true. You feel the truth of that. That's the importance of storytelling, to counteract the narrative of being separate.
That was really eloquently put by both of you guys. Though, you guys had some great stories. From talking about storytelling, just the way, Del, you mentioned how, stories bring communities together, continue traditions and everything. Efo, you mentioned how, storytelling, truth telling, can help resolve trauma, which is, the key portion of healing, and just the way that looks and everything. And those are some great answers, and we really appreciate that. Going to turn it back over to Colette.
Sure, thank you, Cam. I have one general question, and would love to get your reflections on how those who are engaged, let's say in the United States or in other countries, in peace building processes, whether it might be working on a peace agreement or reconciliation process, or addressing past wrongs or past abuses through a truth commission type of process. And many of the processes are set up in a technical way oftentimes. And there's the focus on talking, people resolving. And you're talking about a lot of things that are not necessarily part of those processes. The balance between storytelling and those stories that can help perpetuate potential harm and victimness. So you're talking about a lot of nuance and complexity that I'm curious if you were to give some wisdom, or if somebody were to ask you, hey, you know, what would you think we might look at doing, or we might consider as we start these processes or technical processes of truth telling, reconciliation, or negotiation peace agreements, or dialogue between two different groups that are at odds? What are some things that you feel are so fundamental that need to be integrated in some way or considered in order to have some sort of success of, I don't know, the word peace, or no more separateness, or, you know, oneness, to become more one? What might that be? How do we meld something like that? Big question. So I'm just whatever comes to mind.
Okay, I'll go there. One thing that we already mentioned, Del mentioned, is being present. The person who is doing the process themselves, and invite the other two parts to be present. That's so important. And when you're present, like I said, you are in your body. You're really present in the body. I do this a lot with the reconciliation between couples. Yeah. When they come, they always want to begin to talk right away with the traumatic energy they bring in. But I said, whoa, let's wait. Let's just take a little time. First of all, let's connect between three of us. Do you know me? I want you to know me, and I'll know you a little bit. I'm not taking much of your time. It's just 2 minutes, you know. Hey, what's happening today? So we kind of unload all that fight energy and just to be present here, to stabilize, you know, and look for the resources, even in the room or whatever we bring in, that we feel more comfortable and safe wherever we are. Yeah, the safety is very important. Help people feel safe wherever they are in this moment of resolving a conflict. So that's two things important. First is present. Second is to help them feel safe both ways. And then thirdly, helping people not to interrupt this during the process. Because there's a lot of this start talking and the other one say, no, that was not true. So if you allow that to happen, we get lost. It's just feel in the body while the other one is talking about their part. Yeah, you don't interrupt. I learned that from my grandfather. You don't interrupt. You just listen. Even if you don't agree, even if it doesn't feel comfortable, that's where you actually stay with it. No interruption. And then the fourth thing is talk about yourself. Do not talk about the other person. Like, they did that and he did that and he was doing this and he's always doing this and he's always saying that. No, when you talk about the other person, you're always blaming. It's when I say talk about yourself, this is how I feel. This is how I felt. So when I talk about myself, I'm being just to myself. When I talk about the other person, I continue to perpetuate the conflict because I don't know much about the other person. Even if you live together as a husband and a wife, you don't know about the other person and what they're feeling in their system. So it's beautiful when they can follow those 4 rules. I tell you what, session is 1 hour, but sometimes in half an hour, they get up and go reconciled because it's quicker than having to talk so much about it. So with those 4 points, I will let Del add more stuff that he has so much richness and wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Efu, and it's hard to translate individual or a small group to a large group. You know, things get lost in translation, I think. And, you know, I do agree the presence and safety and, you know, not assuming, no assumptions is a key one. And I also think that in group conflict, it's always about treating the other group as other. When we start to other and dehumanize them, bad things can happen, even if that's not the intent. So we have to remember and rehumanize that we're all part of the human family. We all live on Turtle Island together. We're all humans, and we're the same in that way. And we have, our genetics are largely nearly identical. There's tiny percentage difference. So focusing on difference creates even more problems. So we have to find out what's similar or the same that we experience. And then we can begin relating again. We can relate to each other instead of assuming. And I think another important principle is, if you don't know, just ask. Say you don't know and just ask. That always helps. Come from a position of curiosity. I really wonder what it's like to be them. What is it like to be from where you're from? What is it like to have those problems and to face them? And what is it like to not have the resources to resolve this? I think the attitude is really important, so that you can come in with a curious learner. And if you come with that, you're not out to prove anything. You're not out to say you're right and they're wrong, or that my way is the only way and your way doesn't make sense, or I don't like it. It's more of like, I wonder what it's like to be you in this body, in this place today. And if you can come with that kind of mindset, I think it starts to go in the right direction. And then you have to stay. It's really hard to stay sometimes when difficult things are said. But if you can really stay in your body and stay embodied and just don't take it personal. That's really hard. That's really, really hard not to take it personal. But oftentimes when people are saying things like that, it's something within them that is unresolved. So let them, find a way to not take that personal and realize they're hurting inside. They just need a little bit of help too. Just kind of finish with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I add one more thing that I remember as Dale was speaking? I love this, when you're with another person, when they're speaking and you're listening so nicely, and then, and that also. Thank you, Dale. I just remember one thing that I think in our society today, we tend to tell people, say you're sorry, like asking people to say they are sorry. And I just realized from my experience that when we say we are sorry without being ready, it's almost like we are making ourselves wrong and we're making the other person right. And then we feel bad. We both feel bad, But if we can actually only take responsibility, one group or one person, just take responsibility for what you feel like it can be your part. What do you feel like you could take responsibility of? When people know that, when they say, well, I will really take responsibility of my part, that I didn't listen clearly to what was said before. So the other person feel completely, and then they said, okay, and I take responsibility of my part that I spoke too fast. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, when one, I have always noticed, when one starts, the other one begin to also let go. So we don't apologize. Well, I just wanted to say this because I remember one of the things in the culture in the US, I brought Brazilian women from here, from the community, to the UN. And give presentation of the work we do here with women. And this woman was there for 2 weeks. And then when she was about to finish to leave, she said, the sisters that received her and gave her a place to stay and all that, they asked her, so Vanya, just can you tell us, what did you learn from this culture? What new? This is your first time, right, to come to the US? What new did you notice? Like you didn't know anything about this culture. She didn't blink her eye. She said, sorry, I'm sorry, excuse me, sorry, excuse me, oh, thank you. I'm sorry, excuse me, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, thank you. She said, oh my gosh, I was so tired of hearing that. That's how she gave us a feedback. And I never thought of that, yeah? And she thought it was like a machine. And she said, nobody, I looked at everybody. Nobody was looking at anybody when they were saying that. Sorry, excuse me, thank you. Sorry, excuse me, thank you. Sorry. It was like a machine. And she thought, I don't want to hear that anymore. And it's interesting that kind of got her in very different way. So that's what I'm saying, that sometimes we just say those things because it's obligation. But when you want to resolve a conflict from deeper place, we don't need those. We actually need to just take responsibility of our part. And when the other person hear that, they get alleviated. They feel like a relief around that. And that's, I think, I just wanted to add that in there, together with everything that has been said here.
And thank you, Del and Efu, and the practices and the approaches that you describe. What really spoke to me is that there are opportunities for a deeper resolution, to get at the matter and provide the context and the space for a deeper resolution, rather than just a quick surfacey that we never really resolve it. It's just a thank you, sorry, which is very surface. So thank you for that. So Cam.
Yeah, I just had one last question. Ethel, you even mentioned a little bit about the apology and everything, and apology is typically a big part of things such as spirituality and everything. You guys have both mentioned spirituality throughout the conversation. So I guess my question is, what is the biggest role of spirituality within you guys' practice and healing, and what is that necessarily done for you guys to one, either lead you toward healing and just put that into your practice? Like what is the role of the ancestors, or in everything, and just healing in general in you guys' practices, because it's been such a big thing that you guys have mentioned throughout.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll go first, if it's okay with you.
Yes.
Thank you, Cam. That's I think we have a saying, Kabalia, which is, there's a spirit in everything. All living things, all objects. I mean, most objects are part of Earth. They're part of an element. Our cup we drink from is from, everything we have, your glasses, they all come from a combination of the 4 elements. So I think just knowing that there's a spirit in everything, and that you're part of that larger spiritual piece. Like, I'm one spirit in the soul of Earth, in the soul of the galaxy. I am one, tiny, tiny microcosm of the whole. And so I can only do my part, in witnessing, in making myself available, and seeing what may arise or emerge from things that have happened, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago to today. And I think really the most critical question is, are we humans who have spirituality, or are we spirits living a human life? And at least from the system I'm from, it's the latter. We're spirits in this human body living on this earth school. that we have lots of lessons to learn. And that's the way I look at it. And it's just that kind of orientation of, and little messages come with that. Like the elders will say, walk softly and intentionally, because you're walking on Mother Earth's back. If you see the river coming, put an offering in there for all the spirits that live in there. And that's what we drink. Be grateful, thankful, acknowledge that. If you do go hunt or take a plant, never take ones where it's not going to replenish itself. Don't over consume, only take what's absolutely needed, and be really respectful when you do. Like, I just took a spirit, they're feeding us or they're healing us, and I do an offering back. And for example, some of the other practices are, when we do a giveaway, say for someone's birthday or graduation, whatever, we're not actually celebrating that person. We actually do it to celebrate everyone that around them, everything around them that led to that moment. And that we express our gratitude for our ancestors, for all our relatives, to celebrate a moment as considered successful. But, you know, in our way, your biggest success is how you relate to everything. That is success. And so if I acknowledge that everything has a spirit, and I'm respectful of that, then good things can follow. Things will follow regardless. And I can accept it easier. Because accepting is, and relating to things is the hardest part, right? Just like what Peter Levine said, it's not the actual trauma that's the problem, it's how we relate to it.
Mhm.
And everything is about relating. And if you have the spirit and you call them in, they can help you. They can help you relate in a good way.
Yes. Thank you, Del. I'll say amen to that and just say that, and as you're talking about all of that, I was really just remembering these two words, connectedness and relationship. And Del, you mentioned that also. So when I'm connected, I'm connected. I'm connected to everything around me. I'm connected to my mother. I'm connected to my father. I'm connected to the whole lineage of my ancestors. I can see through all the way, no ending, you know, behind me. Like I imagine, we always imagine, my culture, we imagine our ancestors behind us, like they are pushing us forward. So when I connect with my ancestors behind me, then everything in front of me fall into place. I also connect with it. Because I'm connected here, then I'm connected here. I look at the plants, I look at people, I look at everything, and I feel okay. And this is spirituality. And it's not something that you practice only in 1 minute. It's like the whole life style. And that also affects on how I make my own decisions in everything that I do in life. Yeah. So it's everything that Del brought and putting it into this towards relationship and connectedness to all that is, from the back to in front of us. And that's it.
Thank you guys for your words. Those were very powerful, and those are things that, you know, I feel like need to be adopted by everyone, you know, no matter what you believe in and everything. This is applicable to anyone, you know, just the way that you can look at life and heal from things that have, you know, that have been weighing you down, make you feel connected to everything around us and everything. So that was great. We really appreciate you guys' words for that.
It's been such a beautiful conversation and such an amazing time to be able to share this podcast with Cam and planning with Marisa, and having you both, Del and Efu, as guests here and to just share your wisdom and your heart and your, let me shift that, share your spirit and your heart and your wisdom and all the things that you bring to this conversation. I'm so grateful. And I know we're at time, at the exact time, and so I offer to you, if there are any questions that some of our participants might have, and if you're able to stay on for a few more moments, I welcome that. I also understand if you need to leave, feel free to leave, and we will honor that choice. But thank you so much.
Okay. I think I could give it 10 minutes if there's anybody who have a question. Yeah.
Yeah, same here. Thank you, Colette.
Okay, wonderful. So for those who have joined us, if you have any questions for Del or Afu, feel free to put that in the chat and we can pose that for you.
If no one has any other questions, Del, there is one question I would like to ask you. Possible? Okay, yes, I'll go ahead. So also one thing that we've heard a lot in indigenous cultures, and some people we've even had on the podcast, they mentioned the idea of the 7 generations in terms of trauma and especially with ancestors and how trauma is healed, and and how it's resolved. So could you explain that a little for our guests and kind of talk about how that has manifested itself within your tribe and your clan, and how you guys have resolved trauma and move forward with that?
Yeah, thank you, Cam. I guess I think people have heard of 7 generations, and just like my ancestors who were part of the chiefs back then and their treaty negotiations that they bargained with the United States to say, we'll cede X million acres of land, but you got to promise to provide healthcare, education, and the like. I wouldn't be here if 7 generations ago they hadn't made that agreement with the U.S. And we know the U.S. hasn't upheld its part, but the tribe has upheld its part, and it still continues to hold the United States accountable for that agreement, 7 generations ago. And one of the things I was taught in one of the ceremonies was, they said, always be careful of your words and your actions, because they have a ripple effect 7 generations from now. And they said, so the words can hurt, so choose them really carefully when you're talking to somebody or sharing. And I think people would agree on that might be helpful for today's social media. Whenever somebody gets down and they really pile on, those words hurt, and they're difficult. So you do need to choose carefully. And then also the choices you make. One of the morning prayers that we're taught is, we pray to the sun and the moon and various other things, but one of the central pieces is our prayer for those that are following in our footsteps. That's what we say, like the younger ones following us. Like we can't see them following us, but we know they're there. And to those yet to emerge, that's another thing we say. For those yet to emerge, I want to provide a good path. I want to be a good, like all of us will become an ancestor. We'll all be ancestors eventually. What did we do with our time here to make it better for the ones following us in our footsteps? That's what that concept means. And I think it's a good teaching, you know, to try your best. And of course, we're all humans. We all make mistakes, and that's okay. In fact, there was one time somebody said, "Hey, Del, I know you know a lot of stuff, but I invite you to fail." And I was like, "What? What do you mean invite me?" He goes, "Because then you're going to learn so much, and you're going to help us that much more once you've failed, because you'll learn how to come back from that failure." And I was like, "Oh, wow, that is an interesting way of looking at it. It really is." So thank you, Cam. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you for explaining that, Dylan. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay, well, I think we can close today. We'll close the circle. And thank you again. And it's been such a pleasure and honor today. And I look forward to your words and what you shared being shared more broadly as soon as we are able to get this both in video form on the web, and when the incredible Cam Cassar produces with his magic the podcast version. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Del. Thank you,
Thank you,
Colette.
guys.
Thank you, Sarkam.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody that's present there. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.